Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world. This is our special episode number 43 as the last final warning message just prior to the close of provision. Now, I would like to read again the statement on 1SR. 1SR page 64. This experience of the Israelites in departing from Egypt was written for the instruction of those who should live in the last days. Before the overflowing scourge shall come upon the dwellers of the earth, the Lord calls upon all who are Israelites indeed to prepare for that event. So, how could you be able to prepare that event unless we will be told concerning that event? Now, brothers and sisters, this message, to repeat again, is addressed to all who wish to be among that special company, the 144,000 living saints. Now, I would like to read again the statement on 1SR page 101. What is the number of Israel? It says, it has been made clear that Israel after the flesh is a photograph of Israel by the promise. In the Exodus movement, all the tribes went out of Egypt. If this is a photograph of Israel by the promise, then all the 12 tribes must come out now as well. 12 tribes must escape the ruin of Ezekiel 9, death of the firstborn, and Isaiah 63, the Red Sea. The number of them is said to be 12,000 from each tribe, making a total of 144,000. So, that is very plain, brothers and sisters, right? This predicted event is pointing only to the 144,000 living saints. Because God will no longer take out people, mixed multitude, but only the 144,000 living saints. Now let us read again the statement in track number 8 on page 76 and page 77. It says, seeing ourselves on the brink of eternity, we are impelled to join with Elder James White in his enraptured exclamation, "O glory, hallelujah! My poor heart is set on fire for the kingdom, was set on fire for the kingdom, while I'll dwell on this sweet prospect before the true believer. If we hold fast but a few days more, the dark shades of night will vanish before the glory of the preparatory scenes of the coming of the Son of Man." A word to the little plant, page 8. Only those who have a part in this antitypical Exodus movement will be privileged to sing the song of Moses and the Lamb and to share in the promises of the covenant in the antitype. So that is very plain. Track number 8, page 76 and 77. Only those who have a part in this antitypical Exodus movement, clearly indicating that the antitypical Exodus movement will no longer be a mixed multitude. And as far as the Bible is thus concerned, it is the 144,000 who sing the song of Moses and the Lamb. Here in 2SR page 170, it says, 2SR page 170, the 144,000 are called Israel because their experience is a duplication of that ancient Israel going out of Egypt to possess the promised land. Going out of Egypt to possess the promised land. Now, brothers and sisters, let us meditate and ponder deeply before everything is too late. The statement in 2TG, I would like to read to you. 2TG number 41. On page 3, it says, I am, however, certain that God will not keep us ignorant of the things we ought to know. If it becomes necessary for us to know ahead of time the day and hour of the purification of the church, the antitypical Passover, we will be told. Yes, we shall know at least as much in advance as Moses knew about the Passover in his day. So the voice of inspiration says, yes, we will be told. And how God will tell His people? Only through the medium of the prophet. According to the voice of inspiration, B.T. Hotep died. He himself says, I do not know when would be that antitypical Passover. But he himself guaranteed that God's people, yes, they will be told. And such information is at least as much in advance, more in advance than in the days of Moses. Why? It's so because in the days of Moses, God's people were located only in one nation, the literal physical Egypt. But in the antitype, the 144,000 are scattered throughout the whole world. And that is the reason that such information must be at least as much in advance than in the days of Moses. But the absolute fact is that there was a promise, a guarantee that we will be told. Remember, the Bible is very plain. God take out His people from Egypt by a prophet. Hosea 12, verse 13. Now, brothers and sisters, let us deeply consider, seriously consider all the evidences that we will offer unto you to prove to you, brothers and sisters, that since there are two sections of the Exodus movement by which they are our only type. The first section is led by Moses. The second section is led by Joshua. And that Passover is pointing to the first Passover under the leadership of Moses and the first Passover under the leadership of Joshua. Both of them are typological. Therefore, we need now to study the fulfillment of that predicted event, the antitypical Passover. As there are two photographs, there are two pictures that have been given by God. Now, in the first section, that is crossing the Red Sea. In the second section, crossing the Jordan River. And both of them are typological. But according to track number 14, on page 6, it says, all of these counterparts then are but another scriptural intimation and confirmation of the age-old truth that history repeats itself and on a much broader scale than in the original. Track 14, page 6. So, in the antitype, it is more broader in scale, larger in scope, brothers and sisters. For example, in the days of Bethel, there is a counterpart that had been fulfilled in his lifetime. And what is that? The giving of the rod. But that portion, going out of Egypt, was not fulfilled in his lifetime. And he himself declared clearly that such events still future in his days. Now, here, brothers and sisters, who are they that had been destroyed on that Passover night in the first section of Exodus? The Passover in the land of Egypt. All the firstborn sons. But who are they that had been destroyed in the second section of Exodus under the leadership of Joshua? Achan. So, let us distinctly separate now those typological events in their corresponding antitypical fulfillment. Now, for example, here in 2TG, number 46, page 38, it says, 2TG number 46, page 38. Here's the reason for the imminent purification of the church, the destruction of the Achans of today, in preparation for the antitypical crossing of the Jordan. So the destruction of the Achans of today. We know that that predicted event was not realized in the days of Bethel. Who are they, the Achans of today? Now let us read track number 4. Track number 4 on page 43. Track number 4, page 43. It says, Achan's taking the Lord's money represents that class of church members who covet the silver and the gold which he has set apart for himself, and who thereby rob him of that which is his own, tithes and offerings. Now, brothers and sisters, there are only two classes that rob tithes and offerings, by individual and by a nation. But when we go to Malachi 3, the robbery mentioned there is by a nation, because it says the whole nation robbed me. Now, I would like to read 2TG number 30. It says here on page 18, where is one to look for God's storehouse? Wherever God's truth is for today, from wherever meat in due season is dispensed. 2TG number 30, page 18. The statement, bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, implies that some are already bringing into it, but not all. This, along with the charge that the whole nation is robbing God. Who robbed God? The whole nation. Positively shows that the tithes are now brought not to God's storehouse, but to some other house. To repeat, God's storehouse has ever been and ever will be where the message of the hour is, where present truth is, the house from which meat in due season is dispensed at the time the tithes are paid. Now, brothers and sisters, it's easy to understand. Whole nation represents to the entire movement. So any movement by which they were collecting tithes and offerings, by which in reality there was no present truth, there was no meat in due season that had been deposited by God into that movement, they were robbing God, the whole nation. And they were represented by antitypical Acans. Brothers and sisters, antitypical Acans. But in track number 4, also pointing to some independent, or I would like to use the term independent, meaning voluntarily place themselves into that office, although God did not appoint them to be His messengers. Here in track number 4, page 43 and 44, it says, the tithes and the offerings are of the Lord's substance, and those who think that they can so manipulate them as to accomplish whatever end is desired are deceiving themselves, not God. For His command is, bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house. Malachi 3 verse 10. The storehouse is the only place designated where one may bring the tithes and offerings and unload from his shoulders the heavy responsibility which a faithful stewardship imposes. To do otherwise with them is to leave one's account in the heavenly ledger, standing in the red, even though one may appropriate them to some meritorious work of charity while it is yet today. Therefore, flee from this sin of Achan before it is forever too late. As I live, saith the Lord God, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from his way and live. Turn ye from your evil ways, for why will ye die, O house of Israel? Ezekiel 33, verse 11. So there are also some individuals by which do you think that maybe I could use the tithes and offerings by helping the poor people or whatever desire that they think it is a meritorious act of charity. Still, the voice of inspiration says that is the reason given by Achan. Achan say that, no, I reserve this for the good of the Lord. The divine command must be strictly followed. Bring ye all the tithes and offerings into my storehouse. And the only storehouse recognized by God as His, of course, that movement by which God deposited the present truth. And since God deposited the present truth into that movement, and the tithes and offerings are His money, that is God's money, God wants that His present truth must be supported by His money. So, the destruction of Acans are pointing to all of them that manipulated the Lord's money, whether by individual or whether by a nation. But the destruction in the antitypical Passover in the first section of the Exodus is pointing to all the firstborn sons, as well as pointing to Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. So, the reason why we proclaim this message is to give opportunity to all of us to escape the oncoming destruction. So, let us now study closely, brothers and sisters. So the statement in 2TG 46 on page 38 saying, hence the reason for the imminent purification of the church, the destruction of the Acans of today, in preparation for the antitypical crossing of the Jordan. So, this message must be a message as in the days of Joshua, that we should not follow the attitude of Achan. He did not voluntarily confess to the Lord, and he waited the time when everything is too late, by which such repentance is no longer acceptable with our Almighty God. Now, I would like to focus first our attention to the statement. Why is it that the paradoxical part is found in the fourth chariot? Now, let's go back again to the reading. In 2TG number 22, page 19, it says, the paradox in this prophetic symbolism is with the fourth chariot. So where is the paradox? in the symbolism, it is with the fourth chariot. So we need to focus to the fourth chariot because the paradox is found in the fourth chariot. Not on the first, not on the second, not on the third. But the paradox is found only in the fourth chariot. Now, then it says, inspiration, obviously, is forewarning someone of something very serious that is taking place at this particular time. You see, the statement says, inspiration is forewarning someone. Whoever that someone, I do fully believe, he must be God-inspired human channel, God's servant. And unto him was given the information that there is something very serious that is taking place at this particular time. In reality, that particular time is the particular time when God commanded His people, prepare for that event, departure from Egypt. Now, what is the paradoxical part which is found in the fourth chariot? In the days of Betty-Hotep, the explanation given, let us read 2TG, number 22 on page 19. It says, the paradox in this prophetic symbolism is with the fourth chariot. You see, it is hitched to two teams, the gray-souled and the bay. One team trying to take it in one direction, south, and the other in another direction, to and fro through the earth. What is to become of the chariot, and which of the teams is likely to take it? That is the paradox, for they cannot both have it unless they walk together. As this is a paradoxical symbolism, it has been a mystery ever since the prophet wrote it. And as it is now disclosed for the first time, inspiration obviously is forewarning someone of something very serious that is taking place at this particular time. So the only portion that had been explained by Betty-Hotep, by which, according to the explanation, the paradoxical part is that there are two set of horses pulling the chariot in opposite direction. The bay horses, they are trying to bring the chariot to walk to and fro through the earth, according to the voice of inspiration. But the grizzled horses, they want the chariot to stay in Egypt. Now, in our days, first of all, it is really a paradox to apply it in the days of Betty-Hotep, because it will be contradictory to the typological event, by which he himself declared that that prophetic event going out of Egypt are still future in his days. And how could it be that there is a bay horses in his days that is trying to pull the chariot to take out from Egypt and to bring them into the promised land? So the only reason that the prophet applied it in his lifetime, because of that expectation, he thought that the 144,000 living saints are already in existence in his lifetime. And not only that, he of himself, Betty-Hotep, thought that he would be a part of the 144,000 living saints, as it is stated from the many of their writings. For example, here on the old symbolic code, by which the prophet says, we, as a part of the 144,000, will no longer to taste death. So that is an indication that he expected to be among that special company. So I would like to read 3 symbolic code number 5 and 6, page 8. 3 symbolic code 5 and 6 on page 8. It says, For the message teaches that we, as a part of the 144,000, shall never die. So if you will apply the grammatical rule, saying we applied to themselves, but they died. So that is only a false expectation. But the focal point of such paradox in the fourth chariot is found in 2TG 22:22. Now let us read 2TG number 22, page 22. God's Spirit, having been silenced in the North Country, must denote that the messages of God in the North Country were generally rejected, especially the one of the fourth chariot, which caused the Spirit of truth to turn away and to bring truth no more through them, to be silent there, and that, therefore, there is not to be expected any truth through them. Now let me ask you a question. Who displeases God's Spirit? Of course, brothers and sisters, it could not be, I would like to read this reading. It's very important because the statement, have quieted my spirit, in the north country, it displeases the Spirit of God. And that is the reason that God withdrew His Spirit to be silenced there. And who are they, the causes why God's Spirit had been displeased? I would like to read verse 2 TG 22:19. It says, the prophet Zechariah was anxious to know as we are, for he asked, what are these, my Lord? And to his question came the answer, these are the four spirits of the heavens, which go forth from standing before the Lord of the whole earth. The angels' answer is positive. The chariots, he declared, are the spirits of the heavens, who stand before the Lord, and who are sent to go to and fro through the earth. Now, brothers and sisters, the four chariots, their destination is to go to and fro through the earth. Then it says, plainly, then, these four teams and chariots symbolize four messages, four spirits sent from God's presence. Now, brothers and sisters, what are the representation of the four chariots? Four spirits, four messages sent, cometh from what? From God's presence. Then obviously, there is no possibility that they could displease the Spirit of God. Now, brothers and sisters, therefore, Zechariah chapter 6, the red horses, the black horses, the white horses, and the bay horses, these four are God's divine leadership by which these four, they have four messages, or each of them, there must be messages by which the message that was given to them is to go to, according to the voice of inspiration, to and fro through the earth. Obviously, therefore, the only one that displeases the Spirit of God, it must be the grizzled horses. The grizzled horses, brothers and sisters, cannot be messengers cometh from the presence of God. Because if you will include the grizzled horses, there are already 5. But the Bible says only 4. There are only 4 divine leadership that are sent by God in the vision of Zechariah chapter 6. So the grizzled horses cannot be represented by leadership which is cometh from God. Now, let me ask you a question. In 1844, when God raised up the Seventh-day Adventist Church, are the leadership at that time, together with Sister White, are they represented by the grizzled horses? Now, we need to answer that question. Are they represented by the grizzled horses? Why all of them are faithful? It is illogical, right? Now, what horses do they represent? Are they represented by the bay horses? Then it will be contradictory to the Bible, because the grizzled horses come first before the bay horses. So if the leadership in 1844, we will say bay horses, who are they then the grizzled? It cannot be the Millerites because they were represented by white horses. And the reformers during the Dark Ages, they were represented by the black horses. And then the apostles, the early Christian church, they are represented by the red horses. Obviously, therefore, the paradoxical part, without any doubts, must be in the period of the judgment that pertains to the living. That the grizzled horses must be the leadership by which God did not appoint them. They must be self-sent messengers. Now, let us read the statement in 2 TG 22, page 22. God's Spirit having been silenced in the north country. So in this study, Zechariah chapter 6, what is the north country? What is the north country? Babylon. So let's read track number 2. On track number 2 on page 28, saith the Lord God, I will bring Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, from the north. Ezekiel 26 verse 7. Again, when the Jews were returning from Babylon to Jerusalem, God spoke through his prophet, Zechariah, saying, Who, come forth and flee from the land of the Lord. Zechariah 2 verse 6. Thus identifying Babylon as the north country. But as we are dealing with the fulfillment of prophecy in the New Testament era, the north country in this connection must be antitypical Babylon, Christianized Rome, where God's people during the New Testament period have gone. So that is very plain. What is the north country? Babylon. And what is that Babylon? It must be antitypical Babylon, Christianized Rome, not pagan Rome. It says Christianized Rome. So, First of all, it points out to the Dark Ages, the ecclesiastical Rome. There are only two mentioned that go to the North Country, the black horses and the white horses. Thus, the white horses displeases the Spirit of the Lord. It is quite opposite, the description, right? Because according to track number 2, I would like to read the statement given by the shepherd's rod, spotless record. So, let us read first in page 33 and 34 in track number 2. Of all the 7 churches, Revelation 2 and 3, only the Philadelphian, the Millerite, the Philadelphian church did not run afoul these same satanic practices. Ever true to God, it closed its brief but spotless career in 1844, its appointed destination. Having lived its entire life under the personal supervision of its founder, it was never new modeled, thus being without condemnation, as perfectly illustrated by the third chariot and its white horses. So, it cannot be the white horses that displeases the Spirit of the Lord. How about the black horses? Who are they, the black horses? The reformers that had been sent by God during the dark ages of religion. Now, let us read the statement. Here, in track number 2, we know that the black horses represent the reformers. On page 27, in track number 2, the second chariot. And in the second chariot were black horses. Universally, the figurative significance of black is bondage. So as the martyrdom of the early Christian church was followed by the dark ages of religion from 538 AD to 1798 AD, it is very evident that the chariot with the black horses represents the church and its leadership during this long prophetic period in ecclesiastical Roman bondage. And secondly, brothers and sisters, how could it be that they could displease the Spirit of the Lord when all the 4 horses are sent by God, cometh from His divine presence? The red horses, black horses, white horses, and the bay horses. So if you will study and dig deeper, the focal point in Zechariah chapter 6, which is called the paradoxical, is only in the 4th chariot. And there is no other horses that displeases the Spirit of the Lord. It is the grizzled horses. But what is the paradox there? The paradox in this study is that it seems contradictory because in the Bible, the grizzled horses went to the south country, but the one that displeases the Spirit of the Lord is the grizzled horses, by which the Spirit of God been silenced in the north country. What is the north country? Babylon. So the only tenable conclusion is that the 4th chariot, which is the Laodicean, is divided into 2. The typical and the antitypical Laodicean. Because according to track number 2, page 34, the 4th chariot is the Laodicean. That is the 4th chariot. Now, let us read again the statement here in 2TG 22, page 22. God's Spirit having been silenced in the north country. What is the north country? Babylon. Must denote that the messages of God in the north country were generally rejected, especially the one of the 4th chariot. It did not say, especially one of the 4 chariots. No. The statement is very clear. The one of the 4th chariot, the one, is it the typical Laodiceans or is it the antitypical Laodiceans? So that is the question. Because one of the 4th chariot is the causes. Why is it that God's Spirit have been silenced in the north country? It says, especially, meaning particularly, the one of the 4th chariot, which caused the Spirit of truth to turn away and to bring truth no more through them, to be silent there. Where? In the north country. And that, therefore, there is not to be expected any truth through them. Brethren, truth is truth. I remember the statement in Sitting Council's Sabbath School Work says that error, how it says, that even it had been held for so many years, it remains error. And truth cannot be afforded to be fair. So, truth is truth and sense is sense. Let us have them both. 1TG number 6, page 32. Now, for example, I would like to read to you 2SR page 112. 2SR page 112. It says, therefore, if this beast, that is the scarlet-colored beast, therefore, if this beast represents our world at the present time, would it not be unwise on the part of God if He should have neglected to foresee the present-day multiplicity of sects and the great confusion among Christendom, if the symbols by this beast fail to reveal the true condition of the churches? As the nondescript beast tells the fall of the church in the period he represents, so must the scarlet-colored. In fact, this is the principal reason why these prophetic beasts are presented. This paragraph is a broad subject, but I would like to pick up only the portion necessary to connect into our subject. Now, the statement says, what is the principal reason why God revealed this prophetic beast? To tell the fall of the church in the period He represents. Although there are two principal reasons. First, to reveal the true condition of the churches. I will not focus first to that portion. To reveal the true condition of the churches. But let us go directly to the portion to tell the fall of the church in the period He represents. The word fall cannot be applied to the church which is not of God, because that church never stand. At the time when it was established, it is already in a fallen condition because it is not of God. The statement to tell the fall of the church must be applied only to God's church. And that statement is closely correlated to Revelation 14 verse 8. Because it says in the Great Controversy, page 300, let's read. The Great Controversy 383. The message of Revelation 14, announcing the fall of Babylon, must apply to the religious bodies that were once pure and have become corrupt. Now, brothers and sisters, the statement is very plain. The Great Controversy 383. The message of the second angel, Revelation 14 verse 8, announcing the fall of Babylon, must apply to religious bodies that were once pure and have become corrupt. Now, it did not say the message of Revelation 14 announcing the fall of Babylon must apply to religious body as if in singular form. But rather it says religious bodies that were once pure and have become corrupt. The only church by which they experience of being pure must be God's church. Because this statement in 2SR, page 131, it says, Jesus calls the daily and the sanctuary, 2SR 131. Jesus calls the daily and the sanctuary holy place. No pagan sanctuary would the Master call holy place, neither can it be polluted, for it has always been unclean. So if that church is pagan, at the moment that it was organized, it cannot be pure. That is already unclean. That is already polluted. So the statement, once pure, must be applied only to God's church, then later on become corrupt. And that is the message of the second angel, Revelation 14 verse 8. Now, let us go back to the statement in 2SR 112. There are only three beasts mentioned there, nondescript, leopard-like, and scarlet-colored. And that is why when we study the beast study, we might ask the question, what is the specific significance? Why is it that God placed 10 horns to the nondescript, to the leopard-like, and scarlet-colored? Then you will say, to denote universal. Universal what? What universal? To denote universal reign, Babylon, bear, and leopard. They were also a universal empire, as stated by the shepherd's rod, explaining Revelation 17 on verse 10, that the 7 kings mentioned there, 7 universal kings. I would like to read 118 in 2SR. As it has reference to the entire world history, under sin, we must consider the number of universal empires or periods since the world began. So there are 7 universal empires. And the first 3 beasts, lion, bear, and leopard, they are universal empires. But why is it God do not place 10 horns on the first 3 beasts in spite of the fact that they were also universal empires? Therefore, brothers and sisters, the term universal, 10 horns, in reality is not referring to the universal empires, the 10 horns, but rather referring to the universal apostasy. And that what it means in 2SR 112. The principal reason why God revealed this prophetic beast, what prophetic beast? Nondescript, leopard-like, and scarlet-colored. The last three beasts having 10 horns to reveal the true condition of the churches. What is the true condition? They were in universal apostasy. Now, let us go back again to the reading in 2SR 112, saying, to tell the fall of the church in the period he represents. Now, it's easy to explain. Nondescript beast. What church had been fallen on the first stage of the nondescript beast? Jewish church. What church that had been fallen on the second stage of the nondescript beast? The Ephesus. What church that had been fallen in the period of the leopard-like beast? That is the Lutherans, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, and the First-day Adventists. That in 1844, they are termed Babylon. According to 1SR, on page 54, it says, if the Protestant churches have fallen and are termed Babylon, so what happened to the Protestant churches? They had been fallen and are termed Babylon. 1SR page 54. So this is the serious question. What church predicted beforehand that will fall in the period of the scarlet-colored beast? When does the period of the scarlet-colored beast begins? Let's read 2SR 114. The period represented by the scarlet-colored beast commenced in 1929. Now, what church predicted beforehand that will fall in the period of the scarlet-colored beast? Now, it will be connected to the subject, the temple's type. Let us read 2SR 271. It says, as type destroyed type, so antitype must have destroyed antitype. That is ancient Babylon, the type of the papacy, robbed and destroyed Solomon's temple, the type of the early Christian church, and led Israel into captivity. This symbolical prophecy meets its perfect fulfillment in 538 AD, when the papacy went forth and destroyed the church, Christian, robbed from them of the truth, and led the followers of Christ into captivity, subject to papal rule. So the temple of Solomon had been destroyed by King Nebuchadnezzar. The antitype is the early Christian church, the Ephesus, destroyed in 538 AD by the papacy. Now, where is now the type of the second literal temple that was destroyed by Titus? There is no other temple that could represent except the Seventh-day Adventist church. Although we will elaborate it more on the subject, the beast and its image. But in this study, we can rest assured to you that the typical Laodicea, which is the Seventh-day Adventist church, predicted beforehand, typifying the second literal temple, it was destroyed by Titus. Although in spiritual aspect, it is quite different. Because, for example, when God declared that Lutherans, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, and the First-day Adventists, it was fallen in 1844. What is the material side to show that it was fallen? Nothing. Even today, Lutherans, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, First-day Adventists are still in existence. But what is the significance in the spiritual side when it says it was fallen? The statement in the shepherd's rod is very plain. 2SR page 97. It says, the second angel's message of Revelation 14 verse 8 had announced that Babylon, the churches prior to 1844, had fallen. Whose churches prior to 1844? Lutherans, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, and the First-day Adventists. And what does it mean that it was fallen? That is to say that God would let no light shine upon His word through these fallen churches. Here's another statement in 2SR 288. 2SR 288. Second, the churches who were in existence prior to 1844 fell with the proclamation of the second angel's message, Revelation 14 verse 8, showing that God would no longer reveal Himself through that channel. So what is the significance in the spiritual aspect when God said that church had been fallen? God will no longer reveal Himself through that channel. Do not expect any truth from these churches. Lutherans, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, First-day Adventist, since 1844. Whatever message that cometh from these churches, it cannot be of God. How could it be cometh from God when God himself declared, I will no longer allow any message to be channeled through these organizations. But the absolute fact is that according to 2SR 245, let us read 2SR 245. It says here, thus the second angel's message of Revelation 14:8 was proclaimed immediately after the disappointment, saying, Babylon is fallen, is fallen. That is, the world in 1844 fell in the same manner as the one before the flood. The present world is called Babylon because the kingdom of Babylon is the immediate one after the flood. Thus, Babylon became the mother of the nations. 2SR 245. You see, the shepherd's rod is very plain. There are two Babylons. The Babylon before the flood and the Babylon after the flood. The Babylon before the flood is called the antediluvian world. And in that period of time, there is no nation, there is no state, but only church. But the Babylon after the flood, nations and states originated. And that is why the proclamation in October 22, 1844 is not addressed. It is not addressed to the nations, but rather addressed to the church as the antitypical Babylon in the antediluvian world. But the second proclamation of Revelation 14 verse 8, by which in reality that is the perfect fulfillment, by which in the Great Controversy, page 390, it says, but the perfect fulfillment of Revelation 14:8 is yet future. Because according to the shepherd's rod in General Conference Special, page 39, the three angels' messages are directly applied in the judgment that pertains to the living. So the proclamation of the second angel's message in the judgment that pertains to the living, no, it is no longer pertaining to the churches, but pertaining to the nations. What nations? There are only two Babylon, Old World and New World, and divided into two, ancient and modern world. The ancient world is the type. The modern world is the antitype. In the ancient world, divided into two divisions, Old World, the antediluvian world, and New World, the postdiluvian world. But in our days, there are two Babylon, the Old World, the continent of Europe, and then the New World, which is the United States of America. Now, it is closely connected to the beast study, but just to read this reading in 2 Symbolic Code, number 1, page 8. It says, 2 Symbolic Code, number 1, page 8. The above explains that the two-horned beast is the one to whom the number 666 belongs, and that this beast of Revelation 13:11 to 18 and the king of the north of Daniel 11:45 are the same power. Therefore, the nation represented by this particular beast and the king of the north, or the man who is to be the head king of that nation in the time when this image beast, the two-horn, enforces the worship of his image, whose image is nothing less than the thing he made, or to make a likeness of the religio-political system of the beast before him, the leopard-like of Revelation 13 verse 1 to 10, that is a likeness of the papal system in the period before the leopard-like beast received his deadly wound. As the fulfillment of this prophecy is yet future, we cannot now tell who will then be the head, king of the north, of this prophetic nation, modern Babylon, that is symbolized by the two-horned beast. Who is modern Babylon? The two-horned beast. And tell me, who is the two-horned beast? United States of America, the mother of the nations. Nations of what? The Christian world. Because that is the only people by which can apply. Once pure and become corrupt. Now let's go back again, brothers and sisters, to our study in Zechariah chapter 6. 2TG number 22 on page 22. It says, God's Spirit, having been silenced in the North Country, must denote that the messages of God in the North Country were generally rejected. What is the North Country? Babylon. But there are two Babylon, the Old World and the New World. What is the Babylon in the Old World? The ecclesiastical Rome. But what is the Babylon in the New World? The two-horned beast. 2 Symbolic Code, number 1, page 8. Therefore, brothers and sisters, the paradoxical part on this study is that how could it be that the grizzled horses displeased the Spirit of the Lord in the North Country, while the grizzled horses, the direction is in the South Country? The only answer that can be given is that the grizzled horses represent the mere fact that it is represented by two horses represents the typical Laodicean and the antitypical Laodicean. That the typical Laodicean, which is the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they were no longer in the South Country. They were already in the North Country. And we can prove to you with different angles that the Seventh-day Adventist leadership at this present time, they were in the North Country. Otherwise, this statement, brothers and sisters, there will be no explanation. Saying that one of the fourth chariot is in the North Country. What is the fourth chariot? Laodicean. Track number 2, page 34. The fourth chariot is the Laodicean. Now, brothers and sisters, the significance of, let us focus first. I would like to enumerate one by one. The significance of each. First, red horses. So, why is it that there are two? Because the first one is the apostolic and the second one is the Ephesus. You see, brothers and sisters? Then, black horses. So, this portion is can be explained only if you will connect to Ezekiel chapter 4. We will explain this later because you need to expound these black horses. The truth is found in Ezekiel chapter 4. And the answer must be found on, I would like to read 1SR. 1SR page 119. It says, lentils, type of doctrine of baptism by immersion. Lentils are used to represent the fourth portion of truth. Alexander Campbell is credited with making the fourth step upward by teaching the doctrine of baptism by immersion, symbolized by the lentils. The variety, lentils, representing the fourth doctrine, baptism by immersion, is not known or used even as much as barley. So with the truth of immersion, baptism by immersion, in the old-fashioned way is not generally practiced even as lentils are not generally used. Again, God has used the right kind of symbol to represent this portion of truth. Now, brothers and sisters, if you will look at the historical event, the founder of the Baptist Church is John Smith. John Smith founded the Baptist Church and the doctrine of baptism. It was founded by John Smith even before Alexander Campbell was born. But why is it B.T. Hotep placed Alexander Campbell, not John Smith? As a matter of fact, Alexander Campbell was baptized in the Baptist Church, baptism by immersion. How could it be that he is the founder of such doctrine, baptism by immersion, while he himself was baptized in the Baptist Church, historically? So there must be something significance why God commanded his servant to place Alexander Campbell in that fourth step. And we will explain that on another portion of our study. Now, and we have the third one, white horses, right? White horses. Now, let's put William Miller and then to his associates. But all of them are messengers, or all of them are inspired messengers of God. And the only one in Zechariah chapter 6, which is not sent by God, are the grizzled horses. So do not forget that, brothers and sisters. The only one that had not been sent by God in Zechariah chapter 6, they are the grizzled horses. Now, in this study, we can easily discern that let us distinctly separate the grizzled horses that already in the North Country and the grizzled horses by which they want God's people to stay in Egypt. To repeat again, brothers and sisters, in reality, Zechariah chapter 6 can be applied in the days of B.T. Hotep only partially. It cannot be the perfect fulfillment for many reasons. First, that predicted event to go out of Egypt was still future in the days of B.T. Hotep. And second, this statement in 2TG 22:22 cannot be applied in the days of B.T. Hotep, by which it says, one of the fourth chariot quieted God's spirit in the North Country, because at that time, the Seventh-day Adventist Church were not as yet in the North Country. But this statement is very plain. Now, let us read again the statement. 2TG 22, page 22. God's spirit having been silenced in the North Country must denote that the messages of God in the North Country were generally rejected especially the one of the fourth chariot who rejected God's messages in the north country. One of the fourth chariot. Therefore, we can easily understand that one of the fourth chariot must be in the north country. And they rejected God's messages. Now, for example, I would like to read to you 1SR 186. 1SR page 186. It says, "We as a people had been honored by heaven with a special message for the world in this generation. We call this message the third angel's message, which is a combination of the first, second, and third angel's messages of Revelation 14, verse 6 to 12. The substance of the message we bear may be classified into 5 subjects. The time of the end, second, the judgment, which is the day of atonement since 1844, third, the second coming of Christ in this generation, the restoration of the true Sabbath, 5, calling God's people out from Babylon, idolatry, which we define to be Sunday, Easter, and Christmas keeping, etc. Because they have refused to acknowledge and renounce the practice of these so-called Christian institutions or festivals is the chief cause of the downfall of Babylon. The call is to depart from these pagan practices to the true worship of Jehovah." Now for sure, in that enumeration, the specific practices, pagan practices by which the Seventh-day Adventist Church had failed to renounce is Easter and Christmas keeping. It is well known throughout the whole world that the Seventh-day Adventist Church are celebrating Christmas, celebrating Easter. So that is the cause, the chief cause of the downfall of Babylon. The same with the statement in 2SR 200. Let's read the statement. It says that is also the reason why the Babylon during the Dark Ages had been fallen. It's so because they failed to renounce these pagan practices. Let me look at the statement given by the Shepherd's Rod. I think 2SR page 273. It says, "With the proclamation of the fall of Babylon, it was announced that the so-called Christian festivals such as Sunday keeping, Christmas, and Easter, also baptism by sprinkling, and other false doctrines were unbiblical and of pagan origin. But as ancient Babylon failed to renounce the pagan system of worship and adopt the worship of the only true God, just so present-day Christendom has refused to reform and turn from these practices. The true mediatorial work of the heavenly sanctuary jointly with the seventh-day Sabbath, as it was then thought, is also unheeded." But during the Dark Ages, the prominent doctrine that they did not renounce is Sunday keeping and baptism by sprinkling. But in modern Babylon, it is Christmas and Easter. Celebration of Christmas and Easter, or some call it Holy Week. So those are the downfall of Babylon. Although our attention is focusing to Zechariah chapter 6. That Zechariah chapter 6, the grizzled horses that go to the south country cannot be the typical Laodicea. Because the typical Laodicea, when this prophecy will be fulfilled, is already in the north country. And they are the one that quieted God's spirit in the north country. What is the north country? Modern Babylon. What is modern Babylon? United States of America. Therefore, brothers and sisters, there are two things in this study as typifying the two Exodus. The first Exodus going out of Egypt and the second Exodus going out of Babylon. Now, I would like to read to you the statement in 1TG number 12 on page 24. 1TG number 12, page 24. It says, "It is plain, moreover, that all the saints are called to get out of Babylon before the plagues of Revelation 16 fall upon her, if they are to be delivered from them. But how can Zion deliver herself if she does not hear the Lord's warnings to leave Babylon? It is therefore very urgent that this message reach her ears." Who is Zion mentioned here? Of course, it cannot be Sunday keepers, because the term Zion, Jerusalem, Israel, can never be applied to the world. It can only be applied to the Sabbath keepers. And without any doubt, it cannot be applied to the 144,000 living saints, spiritual Israel. Because they were not in Babylon. They were in Egypt. They were in Egyptian bondage. So we need to understand the prophecy, brethren. Here in Prophets and Kings, Let me read to you. Prophets and Kings on page 715. No longer have the host of evil power, no longer the host of evil power to keep the church captive. For Babylon is fallen, that great city, which hath made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And to spiritual Israel is given the message. And to whom the message is given? And to spiritual Israel is given the message. 100%. The term spiritual Israel cannot be applied to the Sunday keepers. And to spiritual Israel is given the message, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. Revelation 14 verse 8 and Revelation 18 verse 4. As the captives exiles heeded the message, flee out of the midst of Babylon. Jeremiah 51 verse 6, and were restored to the land of promise. Prophets and Kings, page 715. That is very plain. Where does these people came out? Babylon. And who are that people? God church. So that is very plain in the vision of the prophet, Sister White. Therefore, let us distinctly separate the antitypical exodus going out of Egypt, the antitypical exodus going out of Babylon. In antitypical exodus going out of Egypt, there is only one event, whereas the antitypical or the typical exodus movement going out of Babylon, there are three events, right? There is first returning, second returning, and the third returning. Why three? Because there are three classes of Sabbath keepers to get out of Babylon. And the three classes, first, Sabbath keepers under the banner of the third angel's message. Second, the literal Israel. And third, Sabbath keepers, not literal Israel, and also not under the banner of the third angel's message. Three classes of Sabbath keepers. That is why there must be antitypical first returning, antitypical second returning, and antitypical third and the last returning. Type and antitype should exactly fit and perfectly match. But that event will follow after the first exodus, the first antitypical exodus going out of Egypt. And who are they, the Pharaoh in this study? The grizzled horses. They will try to the utmost of their ability to hold the chariot, to hold the 144,000, to stay in Egypt. The same with Pharaoh of old. But the same as history showed unto us. Pharaoh had been completely defeated. The 144,000, all of them will respond to the call, and all of them will participate on that divine eventuality, the antitypical Passover. Now, I would like to read to you this reading. It says, 1SR Packet Edition, page 56. 1SR Packet Edition on page 56. It says, accordingly, the antitypical Passover will take place in the time of the first fruit harvest, the sealing of the 144,000, the first fruits, the first to go to antitypical Jerusalem. I would like to read again. 1SR Packet Edition, page 56. Accordingly, the antitypical Passover will take place in the time of the first fruit harvest, the sealing of the 144,000, the first fruits, the first to go to antitypical Jerusalem. What is the antitypical Passover? That is the time by which the first fruit will be harvested, the sealing of the 144,000. Therefore, brothers and sisters, after that antitypical Passover, that is the time that Jeremiah 8:20 will be fulfilled, saying, the harvest is past, or the Passover past, and we have not been able to participate that Passover. Now we are lost forever. And with lamentation, mourning, what a disappointment, according to the shepherd's rod. So we need to study it closely, brethren, seriously, and truth is truth, and it will remain truth forever. But the fact is that this message come on the very nick of time. When God commanded Moses to go to Israel and tell Pharaoh to let my people go, to observe me a feast in the wilderness. What feast? Passover feast. Brothers and sisters, the time is very short. Immediately, God's judgments had been poured out in the land of Egypt. Can you imagine the statement here in 1SR? On page 65. It says, brothers and sisters, that according to the voice of inspiration, that when God take out his people from Egypt, the entire nation had almost ruined. It says, not only his chosen suffered of bondage and cruelty, but the Egyptians as well. At the time of the Exodus movement, at the departure of Israel, the plagues came upon all Egypt, and the nation was nearly ruined. On the night of the Passover, there was death in every dwelling, where there was no blood on the doorpost and every stall of beast. 1 SR page 65. So, that is the reason why God said, here is the patience of the saints. What we need is only patience. You can ridicule, you can mock, whatever you want. Like Pharaoh, maybe you will say, who is the Lord? That I will let the 144,000 go. But the time is no longer far distant that God's divine judgments will be poured out. And we will, whether we will leap for joy or gnash our teeth on that very day. The Shepherd says in 1 TG number 6, it says, page 41 and 42, this is your opportunity. Today, you may take it or you may pass it by. But tomorrow, you will either leap for joy or gnash your teeth in the outer darkness. It now all depends on you. So we'll continue the subject on our next episode. May the good Lord bless you and have a beautiful, wonderful evening.